So most of the guests, I'm sure we'll go through some guests in a bit, but a few of them I did pitch to and they said yeah, a few have said no, and a few have not responded. That's just the way it goes. But it's hard to really answer how or why it's grown for someone to reach out to me to come on. I don't know what the answer is to that.
And I think perhaps, what's quite maybe unique about your podcast and the way that, you interact with your guests is that there isn't a set topic, there isn't a set outcome. So I wonder if that kind of takes the pressure off of the people that join you. There's no agenda, really. Wanted to say a huge congratulations for making it to 100 episodes. I actually think that's a really, really cool and really big achievement. I know that you've kind of started, from scratch with this. You've done it all on your own. You've done it just well done. Congratulations.
Welcome to the Winging It Travel podcast with me, James Hammond, where every Monday I'll be joined by guests to talk about their travel stories, travel tips, backpacking advice, and so much more. Right now, I'm taking the podcast on the road travelling with me. So tune in every week for short form episodes detailing all my travels alongside my Monday guest episode. Are you a backpacker, traveller, gap year student, or simply someone who loves to travel? Then this is the podcast for you. This is a casual, informative podcast designed for you to inspire you to travel. There'll be stories to tell, tips to share, and experiences to inspire. Welcome to the show. Let's get into the episode.
Hello, and welcome to the 100th episode of the Winging It Travel podcast. My name is Rachel. I am a guest host for this very special episode, and I'm joined on the sofa by the one and only James Hammond, the owner of the podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, that works.
Owner of the podcast, travel guru, content creator, Instagram influencer, and my very good friend. So welcome to your podcast, James, and welcome to being on the other side of it and being a guest.
Hello, Rachel. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. So first of all, I just wanted to say a huge congratulations for making it to 100 episodes. I actually think that's a really, really cool and really big achievement. I know that you've kind of started, from scratch with this. You've done it all on your own. You've done it alongside having a full-time job and, your own travels. So I think it's a really big achievement to have made it to 100 episodes. And I know that you've got some really kind of cool stats that sit alongside that, like the amount of people that have listened, the amount of countries that have listened, and also the amount of people that have joined you on the podcast, which I think will be kind of our focus today. But yeah, just well done. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's been a bit of a journey. Yeah, it's interesting because technically it's actually 135 episodes, but we're concentrating on the guest episodes today because they're the main bulk of the podcast, right? I do little 10-15 minute ones on a Friday, which I'm not sure all my listeners listen to, but I know there's a crowd out there who like short form, so I kind of cater to them. But yeah, this is the main bulk of the podcast, which is guests like yourself that come on and tell us some stories and their travels. It's been a cool experience. I've learned a lot, actually, to be fair.
Yeah. So I kind of thought we'll get into talking about some of the individual episodes and different guests that you've had on and some we'll talk about that. But I wondered to start with if you could kind of give a bit of a background, because when you started it was people like me who you'd met traveling, people your friends that came on and spoke to you either about trips that you'd been on together or experiences that you both had. And over the last kind of year it's really evolved to becoming people that you've not met, people that might be somebody who's an expert in this type of travel, or somebody who's an expert in a certain city, or somebody who people that you wouldn't have met necessarily in real life. And I thought it'll be kind of cool to hear the background of how you managed to grow the podcast to have those sorts of guests rather than just having your friends on.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, actually, because I'll be honest here. Most of the people who I've not met and are either podcasters and or I guess experts or professionals in the travel field, there's been very few of them that actually I reached out to, if I'm honest. There's a few that I pitched, but a lot of them have actually contacted me to come on, which is great because that means that somehow, somewhere, they've agreed with someone that, oh yeah, that'd be a good idea to go on that podcast and talk about that. So most of the guests, I'm sure we'll go through some guests in a bit, but a few of them I did pitch to and they said yeah, a few have said no, and a few have not responded. That's just the way it goes. But it's hard to really answer how or why it's grown for someone to reach out to me to come on. I don't know what the answer is to that. Is that because they've seen me on a list somewhere? Is it because someone's mentioned my podcast? Do they listen to the podcast regularly anyway? Is it contacts who've maybe been on as a guest and have said to them, oh, it's a good podcast to go on? I don't really know how it's come to that. It doesn't matter, but sometimes it's good to know where your guest's coming from. And I said, mostly I try to mix it up between those guests and then people that I do kind of know, because there is a different vibe to a random person to someone like yourself. I think that maybe comes across in the interview. I'm not sure. It's not a good or bad thing. I'm just saying that there's a different vibe to it.
Yeah. Do you agree to everyone who approaches you
No.
to come on the podcast? You don't?
No.
Oh, interesting. What's your kind of, I suppose you just want people that, you know, have traveled or are traveling. What's your criteria?
Yeah, you do get some random ones. You get a lot of people who are maybe a bit more businessy. So maybe let's say they do travel with their business, not really my scene. I don't think business travel is my audience for sure. So I don't really say yes to that. Unless it's a business related into travel. I don't know, for example, someone reached out the other day and they like do this website to specialize on hotels. So kind of in travel, they reach out to people who maybe is a bit bored of the generic Hilton hotel that they find in every city, but maybe go for more unique hotel experiences. So that has a travel audience.
Yeah.
And I think there's an audience to my podcast that would have that. I will say no to people who are just like reaching out just to get on the podcast. If I feel like there's not genuine travel there or interest in travel, I won't say yeah. And I've said no to a few of them. I also don't do much like family travel. It's normally a no. It's probably an area that I would probably investigate in the future, but right now that's a bit of a no. So it's like that, you know, backpacker vibe, gap year students, even people who've done it 10 years before and want to talk about that, that's fine as well. Like, so I do say no to some people.
So you say it's quite different, obviously, from, you know, interviewing me or your friends or whatever. So what preparation goes into interviewing someone that you don't know? Like, is that a different process to, you know, having me on your podcast, which, you know, we just Zoom, we have a bit of a chat beforehand, then we might press record at some point. I'm assuming that you put a bit more prep into, you know, interviewing guests.
Yeah, well, I've had a bit of a few comments about my prep, which has been extensive. So I do, depending on their area of expertise, I do go into, if they're podcasts, for example, I listen to their podcast. If they are something travel writing, I'll read some of their articles. So I do kind of have a 3 subject attack. First one is normally, I'm keen to see early life, how did you get into travel and how did it manifest into trips? And you sort of do lots of the backpacking trips early doors. So I go to that first to get the understanding behind the person. Then it'd normally be about their travel sort of lessons learned, going into travel business or what they do now. And if it's about their podcast, obviously we'll talk about the podcast at the end as well. So a lot of prep, and I do ask a lot of questions. I make sure there's more questions there to cover the whole hour and a half than not enough, and then we're struggling for a subject. So make sure I do have enough. And some guests have said, yeah, I've had extensive notes that they've not seen too much before. And some guests make notes on the Google Drive. Some don't make any. So it's a mixed bag with that as well. So sometimes I know what the answer is going to be. Sometimes I have no idea. And I don't mind either way.
Yeah, I was going to ask actually, what's kind of easier for you, knowing the answer or having something bit of a surprise? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, doesn't matter. So yeah, I do try to put a bit of effort in because you don't want to be stuck when it's clear that you've not finished the episode, but you've not got nothing to say. I haven't been in that situation. I've been in situations where I read the vibe and they maybe talked for long enough and I need to like maybe get a move on and wrap it up, but never like been short of topics. So it's been quite good.
So I've been having a look at your back catalogue of episodes. So I've had a look back at your podcast archive. And I've also been having a listen and reading the blurbs. I hope I get top marks for preparation for interviewing you. I don't think I'm quite as extensive as you are with your guests, but
Okay.
I've done something.
Yeah.
It looks to me that the first kind of guest, that wasn't a friend that you had on was way back in July of 2021. Episode 22, traveling with Connor Kelly. And Connor is, of course, from the Comeback podcast. Any insights that you'd like to give from that interview, or, kind of anything that you learn, being your first guest and your first time kind of interviewing a non-friend? How did that all go? And how do you feel about that episode now?
Yeah, episode 22, and he's also come on twice to episode 53. Connor was actually a really good start into the non-friend interviews because we had some stuff in common, both like football. He's currently in Southeast Asia still teaching and living there. So the mutual subject was, how does it feel to like live in Vietnam and Saigon and teaching? And we talked about that aspect because that does have a good value for my audience, because a lot of them probably want to go and teach abroad or at least go to Vietnam. So we kind of bonded really quickly on football and travel, and he was generally interested about what I've done in Southeast Asia. So there was a bit of a two-way part of that podcast where I was getting questions, and I think that doesn't happen all the time. That's very key. Like, a lot of guests, and rightly so, they'll just sit there and answer the questions that I fire at them, and occasionally I get some back, which is quite nice to change it up. So Connor was a really nice, easy one to settle into. And what I learned from Connor is, if anyone's checked his Comeback podcast out, he is one of the most consistently relentless podcast producers, and the amount of episodes he's released has been insane. Like, he has roughly been doing it at the same time as me, maybe just a bit longer, but he's got I want to say 2,000 episodes out or something crazy like that. Like, he just relentlessly interviews, releases. So it's good to hear how he's got on with that in terms of podcasting, but also get to know him and his life in Vietnam. And episode 53 that he's on is one of the most popular podcast episodes on my podcast, because we do go deep dive into how you get started into teaching abroad and teaching in Vietnam, which you can teach anywhere, but that's where his experience is. And for some reason, I'm not saying it's better or worse than any other podcast episode, but that one seems to get quite a bit of traction. So episode 53 is maybe number, I think, 2 or 3 out of any guest episode I've ever had. I think you're up there, Emma Thompson's up there, and he is there very quickly with Bambi, my friend. So I think you four are sort of at the top of the guest episodes. So yeah, that's a good achievement.
And do you think part of that is kind of the practicalities behind that episode? So, I think, thinking back on when I was looking at going traveling, it's great when you kind of look online and you look on Instagram and you look at the pictures, but sometimes there is this gap between, a gap in knowledge and you want to go, but you're not necessarily sure how to get there. And so an episode like that really bridges that gap and giving people, this tangible, this is what you do, this is how you do it, this is what the outcome will be, this is, how you can stay there, this is how you get this visa, etc., etc. Do you think that's kind of part of that real appeal?
Yeah, especially for the second one we've done, the episode 53. I think you're totally right. That has probably got more practical, real life advice about how you do get started going to Southeast Asia to teach as a teacher, teaching English. I think that's a little bit different to a lot of my episodes, because we just deep dive into travel stories, right?
Yeah.
But there's more of a real life, almost a career attached to it, but in somewhere different. So people get a lot of information from that episode.
And then kind of thinking about all of the guests that you've had on.
Yeah.
What's the one episode where, you have just really, really clicked with someone? You
Yeah.
know, those kind of episodes where you're sort of laughing and you keep pressing pause on the recording. Have you had any of those where, you know, you're just giggling away at each other with people that you've met through podcasting?
So not my friends.
Not your friends.
Mm. Okay, there's been a couple. I'll give you a few examples and why. Episode 79, traveling with Michael Juergens. Never met this guy. I'll be honest here, he didn't contact me until about 2 minutes before the podcast episode. And I was like, wasn't even sure he was going to turn up. But I actually had COVID at the time and I wasn't feel great. And he understood that I just wasn't in top form. So he said, yep, let's postpone it for a week. Very busy guy. Anyway, we got on a call a week later. I think it lasted about 3.5 hours, which is by far the longest
Wow.
conversation we've had. Obviously, that's not all on record. I think it's about 2.5 hours.
But that's a long podcast.
Yeah, because we did go into tangents and stuff where that couldn't really be on record. Sounds a bit secretive, but there's some stuff that just couldn't go on in terms of the information that he has about certain things. So sounds a bit vague, that, but
It sounds like, you know, CIA agent. Who was he? Jason Bourne?
he was like, yeah, offline. And then as soon as he said that, I was like, okay, so this is not getting added in, added to the story that we're talking about. So there's a lot of that. But we got on really well and we just chatted for ages and he gave me his LinkedIn details. And if I want to go to Bhutan, let him know there's certain things that he could help me out with. And just a really good chat. And he even said at the end of the conversation, he says, I do a lot of podcast episodes, mainly business. And his, like, I don't know if he's a PA or his marketing guy, he reached out to me and said, he'd be a good person to come on and talk about Bhutan. And he's setting up their first ever wine company there and they're growing grapes and all this sort of stuff. A wine angle with travel, but this guy has traveled a lot and it just clicked, like really got on really well. And he said at the end that that's one of the best episodes he's done because it's actually a bit more fun, not as serious on the business side of things. So that was a one that kind of springs to mind in terms of, I was pretty buzzing after that episode. Yeah, that was a good one.
And I think perhaps, you know, what's quite maybe unique about your podcast and the way that, you know, you interact with your guests is that there isn't a set topic, there isn't a set outcome.
Yeah.
You know, like, for instance, he might, you know, on other podcasts have to talk about the wine company, or him, you know, someone might have to talk about hotels on their website. Whereas on this podcast, you can literally talk about, you know, the time that you took a bus, or, you know, the time that you spoke to a horse in the wrong language, and, you know.
Oh yeah, that story.
But yeah, like, so I wonder if that kind of takes the pressure off of the people that join you. You know, there's no agenda really to the podcast.
And I tell you what is also a good sign, especially if they're a podcaster too. A lot of people that are podcasters, whatever business they're in, is when they say, can I have the audio for that? Because I want to release it on my podcast. I think when they say that, they've obviously enjoyed it and they want to release it on their audience, which helps me, but also means they value that conversation. So I had one of those again this week, recorded for Monday episodes, actually. It's going to come out. We have to rearrange, but it's coming out on Monday. And he asked, can I have the audio recording? Because I want to release it on my podcast. The episode I'm talking about is the one before this episode gets released. Episode 99, that was the one that he asked if I can have the audio recording. So I gave him the access to that. That is a guy called Mikkel Thorup, and he runs the business called Expat Money, which also has a podcast attached to it. And it's about helping people kind of move internationally by getting passports, taxes, legal stuff. Very unique business that he has. But again, like you said, I think he does a lot of those speaking arrangements about his business. But the fact that we talked about, he's been to 110 countries, so the fact we talked about some of the countries that he's traveled to and he's recording some of the memories, I think that for him made it a really fun podcast episode. And yeah, he asked for the audio because he said he really enjoyed it. It's been super fun. And he's talked about stuff on there that he's not talked about before. So there you go. You can't ask for more than that.
So hopefully by the time this episode comes out, people will have listened to that episode.
Yeah.
And that leads quite nicely onto my next question, actually. Who do you think your most well-traveled guest has been?
Oh, in terms of the number of countries travelled?
Yeah, I think so. Or do you think there's another kind of way of measuring that?
Oh, that is a great question. I do think that if you're going by number,
Mm.
if you want to measure by just how many countries have you travelled to, this Mikhail guy for episode 99, 110, I don't think I've
That's
had
a
anyone.
pretty that's a
Yeah,
pretty outstanding number, isn't it?
yeah. Emma Thompson says she doesn't know, but she thinks she's around 100 to 110. So she's in that ballpark too. And she's a travel writer and, yeah, avid traveller. So those two springs to mind in terms of a number perspective. But if you're talking about the most travelled in terms of I've heard stories like, wow, what the hell happened there? Then you can't look past Johnny Bilby, who came on, who runs the travel tour company, Wild Frontiers Travel Tour Company. Have you heard of them? Wild Frontiers?
No, I
Uh,
haven't actually.
the more high end in terms of the.
That'd be why I've not heard of them.
Yeah. But he sort of went on a 10-year journey of grief because he was traveling with his partner at the time in the late 80s who died when they're traveling in India. So that happened unexpectedly. He said they're going to get married, spend this whole new life together. So she died, and then he went on this 10-year sort of grieving period of travel, going to like Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Africa, the Silk Road, trying to work out how to get over it, essentially, which kind of led him to the next phase, developing Wild Frontiers. But that journey of 10 years that we talked about he done 3 books. I think he done a documentary in those 10 years with Discovery Channel. And it was before smartphones and all social media. So it was all, like he said, there and then he wrote about it and came back with stories. And some of the stuff he was doing, like horsebacking through Silk Road with a random person to do this documentary with. Just in terms of the type of travel, I think he's probably the most well-travelled I've had. So Johnny Bilby is definitely a guy that I would any given day have a chat with. It's episode 65. He was just such a nice guy, and I think there's just so much to unpack there with his travels that I could have spent all day with him. But yeah, I got an hour and a half out of him, so that was a decent episode, I think.
Have you interviewed anyone on your podcast that you've then gone on to meet in real life? Or do you have any like plans to meet any of your interviewees, your guests in real life?
Okay, so the answer to the question is the first part. Have I met anyone who I've interviewed? Is no, because I haven't really been traveling since I've done the podcast. I've been to a few trips, right? Yeah, the answer to that is no. But is there plans to meet with people when I go travel, in a few weeks? Oh yeah, 100%. Like, especially the US portion. Had a lot of American podcasters or travelers that come onto the podcast are there on my list. And I think the first person that I might be able to meet in terms of time in the UK, there's a possibility of going to meet James Court from the Court Case podcast. He came on with Sweet Tea, who's his other half, and she's a flight attendant. So they came on as a couple. That's UK based, so going home might be able to go and see them. But on the road, I think the first person might be Angela Santos. So as we speak today, episode 98's guest, I'm going to go to Lebanon. She is going somewhere I can't announce because she wants to keep it quiet for now. But there's one day in Beirut that we can cross over, so that might be the first person potentially that I can meet, and that'll be on the 27th of March.
Oh, so pretty soon.
Yeah, that I've met on the podcast and that I've not seen before in real life. I think she is the first person that springs to mind. But caveat to that is, I've got a podcast lined up in Paris in person, who's going to be a guest on my podcast because we're going to meet in person for a coffee and talk about Paris. So they technically might be the first one traveling, but they've not been a guest yet and it's not happened yet. So
Okay, yeah.
So that's possibly going to happen before that.
Okay, so my next question. And I think that you're probably gonna find this one really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I think it's fine to answer with more than one person, potentially.
Yeah.
But out of everyone you've had on, who have you found the most inspiring?
God, inspiring. Bloody hell. That is tough because I put in pretty much every show notes be inspired. And I'm inspired a lot. Who's inspired me the most?
Okay, maybe let's break it down.
Yeah,
Like, okay, so the first part,
yeah.
like, where have you been most inspired to go by a guest on your podcast? Like, has someone come on and spoke about somewhere that's made you go, right, that I need to go there now?
Yeah, that's Bhutan as a country. And I had a tour company who tours Bhutan from Singapore called Druk Asia. They partnered with
Mm.
Druk Air, which is the Royal Airline of Bhutan. Two guys come on from that company who wrote a book about Bhutan, and that's all about Bhutan, and that inspired me. Like, wow, I need to go. And then I had some people come on to talk about it after that. So Emma Thompson's one. She waxed
Mm.
lyrical about Bhutan, and also that Michael Jurgens guy who's building a vineyard there, or several. They're the 3 episodes where I was like, I need to go to Bhutan.
And is it booked? Are you gonna
Oh,
go?
because it's bloody expensive.
Yeah.
You have to book a tour. You can't
Yeah,
avoid
I
it.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, so since you can't go at the moment
Okay.
to Bhutan,
Yeah.
is there anywhere else that is high on the list based on the conversations you've had? Your trip to Greece, was that inspired by your conversation with Peter Fines?
Yes, Peter Fines. So a great guy. He had his publisher. I don't think he had his publisher do this, but the publisher of his new book, which was released late last year, reached out to me early on in the year and said, "Hey, look, we love your podcast. Do you want this book before release to do an interview with Peter? Like, read it, interview Peter, and then obviously talk about Greece, and then obviously it'll probably be out in time when it's actually released." I said, "Yeah, fine." They sent their book over to me in Canada, so it's from UK to Canada. Received this book, one of the first books I got for free in terms of reading for an interview. Loved the book. It's talk about modern and mythical Greece. So I got a bit of history about Greece. I don't know much about mythical Greece. Learned about all the places that Peter went to on his sort of like trip there to do the book, which is kind of like towards the end of COVID times. And that swayed my decision in December to choose Greece over Mexico of a place to go and visit. So yeah, that's
Mm.
probably the one place in terms of that I've been to or was going to go to for sure. That was an episode that inspired me. So Peter Fines inspired me, and I emailed him when I said, "Oh, I'm thinking about going to Greece." He was really enthusiastic about it, gave me some more tips, and he said, "I can't wait to hear about it." Yeah, that's the one episode that inspired Greece.
Who have you found really inspiring as a person? It could be, that like their work ethic to get, like we were talking about, getting all of those podcast episodes out. Or is it someone like, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth now, but episode 91,
Oh, yeah,
traveling to 97 countries on a Bangladeshi passport.
yeah,
That's a pretty inspiring story.
yeah. So I was going to mention Malia because I didn't realize until that episode, and this has been part of my journey this year. I think you've told me off a few times with some of my comments on social media about making it so blasé about how easy it is to travel, and you're like, James, it's not that simple. I'm like, oh yeah, maybe not. So that's been my journey this year, where again, Malia reached out to me to come on the podcast, which is very nice of her. And traveling to 97 countries on a Bangladesh passport, you don't realize like how difficult that is. And some of the
Mm.
stories that she was telling me, is that crossover between are we laughing or are we crying at this? Because some of it's comical, some of it's really sad. The problems that she's had at the border, and she's actually now reached 100 countries. She just completed it a few weeks ago. But yeah, that was a pretty inspiring story, and I just learned a lot in that episode about what it is like to not travel as a white male who speaks English and is kind of at the top of the tree, really. So that was kind of inspiring to hear about and learn about. Quite a character. We got on really well on that one. Like, we just said that it felt like two mates catching up at the end of it. That was how good that one went. I think it was only an hour and 10, hour and 15 minutes, but we could have chatted for hours. Yeah, that was a
Mm.
super episode.
This is another really difficult and potentially mean
This is fun.
question.
Yeah, go on.
What do you think your favorite guest episode has been?
What are the favourites? I knew you were going to ask it, but I'm not going to shy away from the question, so I will answer it. Favourite episode, and I guess naming a friend is a bit of a cop out, isn't it?
Yeah, it can't be a friend.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, we'll stick to kind of, in the true spirit of having guests. And by favorite, we don't mean, who's your favorite person.
Yeah.
I suppose your favorite episode where you came away from it and you went, wow, nailed that.
I will have to give a shout out, I think. It's so comfortable, isn't it? Like picking favourites. But I will say Emma Thompson, I think, has been one of my favourite episodes. And there's no shock or surprising stat that she, I think, is number 2 in the most downloaded of all time since the beginning. She was only interviewed last year, so she's done really well with that in terms of the stats. But I just come away from that thinking, like, this person for a living gets paid to write articles to go on these trips as a job for like 20 years all around the world, over 100 countries, doing the most amazing trips. I just thought that was totally inspiring. I was like, I need to get on that thing that she's doing. Now, I can't write, so it doesn't help, but there must be other ways in terms of business or podcasts to do that. And I come away thinking that was a great episode. And I thought I need to sort some stuff out with the podcast, with traveling. She really inspired me to maybe look at how I can do it going forward after like this quitting job travel phase where I want to try and maintain that lifestyle. So super inspiring. And I nearly had a heart attack moment when Zoom cut out.
Oh God.
Imagine Zoom right now, right? And it just quits. That happened after an hour and I was almost sick. Holy fuck, like what is going on there? Luckily, started Zoom back up and it backed up. So I had the audio file there. So that was like absolute relief.
That's like proper heart in mouth.
Yeah, drop in the stomach. Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got through that. We had a laugh about that. And then, yeah, just a really fun, easy episode to do. And Emma speaks really well, actually. What's underrated is how well people speak. I'm not saying there's better people on podcasts than others, but someone who's probably done it regularly or it's just in that sort of media space tend to speak quite well. Joey's another classic one of that.
He's a writer.
Yeah. Yeah. So she was great at kind of projecting a point about her favourite travels and what she was, doing like next in terms of writing. So yeah, that was an episode that people should get stuck into.
Do you ever find like, with your guests that some people, like you say, they're kind of, it's quite easy to talk to them and kind of draw them out and, or they kind of just run with the question and, they're really good at speaking about these things. And do you find that other people perhaps need a bit more encouragement or coaxing?
Yeah, across the board. So obviously not going to name any names because it's not fair, but there's been guests that just know when and how to answer a question and stop, wait for the next question or the next comment. There's been some people who have been quite nervous and maybe not as confident on the mic. And so it's been a bit of a encouragement, which is absolutely fine. These are all fine, by the way. I'm just saying these are different types of interviews you get.
Different styles, yeah.
And there's people who can just talk forever and maybe don't take much of a break where you kind of have to intervene sometimes or get another question in about something they said that you want to ask more about. So I think they're the 3 different types. And I think they're all got their own special ways. And I don't favour one or the other, just that different types of scenarios when you're interviewing, you kind of learn how to deal with those type of different interview techniques.
And now I'm going to really put you on the spot.
Oh, yeah.
Which one am I?
Do you know what? I've been basing most of these answers on my non-friend podcast episodes. Because talking with friends, I said to you before, is a different vibe, isn't it? We haven't really gone there yet with friend episodes, but you're obviously not the middle one. You're not a nervous or encouragement one.
How rude.
The knowing when to stop, and when the story comes to a natural end, you then be quiet for the next bit. So I think that's good.
Thank you. How do you think like you have grown as a host and as an interviewer over the last 99 episodes?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I analyze this all the time. So I edit a lot of all my podcasts, FYI, and I do take that a tiny bit seriously, so I don't miss one unless I'm really struggling for time, which could happen when I'm traveling. I have learned that I've got better at some things and worse at others over time, and I can't believe that, really. I say so a lot, and that really pisses me off.
Really?
And there's another popular one that I do, especially on the solo episodes. I'm like, oh, stop speaking. Don't speak. Pausing is something I've learned to be something that you should do. There's nothing wrong with a pause. you'd rather be a pause than be like, so yeah, and nah, there's no value in those 3 or 4 words, right? So I've learned to kind of speak more eloquently, if you like, but also I've learned to let the person speak and not butt in or say, yeah, yeah. Because when I'm editing, right, and let's say you speak for a minute, there's like me going, yeah, like 10 times. Don't need to do it. Just let them speak. So I kind of try to limit that to a minimum, but obviously it still happens because you want to feel like you're sort of like getting what they're saying. Oh yeah, right. So I try to limit those sort of reactions when someone's speaking. I can be pretty bad, especially in the early days of wrapping up. I can talk for hours. So I've learned that some people just can't do that. And I can read people's body language a bit better now in terms of like, I feel like they're flagging a little bit or they just want to get to maybe towards the end. And I start maybe going through the notes, skipping some questions and trying to get to the end. So that's why I put what I consider the most important subject first to get that talked about. And then, if things need to wrap up, then I'll wrap up. So yeah, I kind of learned those sort of techniques. I've also learned what I don't like about podcasting, which is editing. Don't like it. And I don't like podcasts in the evening, which we're doing right now. It's absolutely fine because we're mates and it's fine. But if I was interviewing someone new who I didn't know, that'd be a morning podcast because I do better in the morning with no breakfast and a bit of a coffee on the go. It seems to be better for me. Kind of learned that weirdly.
Is that kind of just, bringing that energy, kind of being focused and
focused, yeah. Work better in the morning, whether that's like real job or this. Yeah, afternoon I do take a bit of a lull. That's actually one of the reasons I'd like to not have a full-time job. Realistically, full-time job, I'm doing all my podcast stuff in the evening. That's when I work the worst.
What you're kind of doing is like you're putting all your your best and most valuable time into your day, pay the bills day job, and then the work that you care the most about is getting the worst part of your time just because that's how 9 to 5 works.
Yeah, a lot of the guest interviews are not my mates. Oh no, they would be as well because of the time difference. No, most of the guest interviews in terms of friends or people that are based in Europe are on the weekend, and that's fine because I can do them in the morning, their evening. But a majority of my guests have also been in the evening because they've been based in the US, and I just seem to feel like I don't do my best. Obviously, I try my best, but I just feel like sometimes the morning episodes seem to be better for me, just the way I feel. But yeah, like you say, if I'm going to do editing, I don't like it. Well, I definitely don't want to do that in the evening. I want to do it in the morning. So I'm going to have to kind of switch things up, go traveling and dedicate early morning to some podcast work whilst traveling and see how it goes.
Do you have like a routine prior to interviewing someone?
Coffee. Get coffee on the go. Yeah, no routines. Coffee on the go, get set up, get on Zoom. Yeah. No routine.
And you've not done any interviews in person yet?
I've done a few, yeah.
And is it kind of, what's the difference, do you think, between doing them over and doing them in person?
Yeah, I don't have the right tools, maybe. The right type of mics to do in person. In person, I don't know if you watch any podcast episodes. If people go right on now to YouTube and watch a podcast episode, they've got a big table, one mic each, probably headphones on, and they both feed into like an interface, which is like a box, and that goes into your laptop or your computer. The reason for that is that the feedback's controlled into the box, so you can then have different audio files of different people. So you'll be on one line, I'll be on the other line. You can edit, change the volume, etc. But with USB mics, which I've got, well, if I put a USB mic in between us, it's going to pick both of us up. If I put a USB mic in front of both of us, each one's going to pick the other one up. It doesn't work that well, so I can't actually get the proper sound. But the problem with that is if I'm going to travel, I'm not going to carry like 3 podcast arms, an interface. There's no chance it's going to happen. So I'm going to have to make do with my setup. And I think that's going to be a learning curve traveling about when I interview in person. Like, how is that going to sound the best way to do it? Because I've not really done it really. I've done it a few times, but there have been friends who've done it with. So yeah, that's going to be a learning curve in February, March.
Who would you like to have on?
Famous people, you mean?
Yeah, let's do like that dinner party game.
Yeah.
What 5 people would you like to have on your travel podcast?
I would like to have Joss Stone.
Okay.
Do you know why?
No, I'm not gonna lie, that was quite left field. I wasn't expecting that. Okay.
What do you think I'm thinking there?
Honestly, I've got no idea. Why would you like Jill Stone on your podcast?
Because she's a musician, which is like my first sort of thing, but she's also travelled to every country in the world.
Has she?
Yeah. She made it a thing to
Oh, I
do that.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, who else would you like?
Leveson Wood.
Okay.
Do you know him?
No.
Oh, he does like a lot of BBC travel documentaries in different parts of the world, written loads of books.
Oh, okay.
Lev Wood, yeah. Simon Reeve would be another one.
Okay. And who's Simon? For
Simon
people...
Reeve, you don't know Simon Reeve? Again, another BBC travel documentary maker.
Okay, number 4, who would you like?
They're the easy 3. Number 4, probably someone like Don Parrish. He is arguably regarded as the most travel person ever. He's been to every country, every region, I think, in the world.
Wow.
Yeah, I think he's top of one of the extreme travel community lists. So I think he would be pretty cool. I've actually reached out to him, but I didn't get an email back because I want to hear from someone who's been to every country in the world. I just want to know what that feels like. So I guess I've got one more left, haven't I?
Yeah, one more. It's quite male heavy at the moment, your list as well. Just saying.
Is that allowed to be or not?
Yeah, it's your list.
Okay.
I'm just pointing it out.
I started with women though, didn't I? That left field choice. I've got music in my mind. I want to know someone who travels in music. So let's like travels the world, playing in front of stadiums across the whole world. Like who would that be? Like a band like Muse. They travel the world extensively. Yeah. And they're one of my favourite bands. Again, it's male heavy, but they travel quite a bit in terms of random countries they play in. I'm like, oh, my question to them is like, do you also go and see the culture there? Or do you just turn up, go in a hotel, play the gig and then go home? Like, do you spend 2 or 3 days? You know, like Mick Jagger, he still does, I think, when they tour, he makes sure he goes and has one day like in the local community, someone like does music. He kind of gets out there a little bit to go and see the local area. I'm like, oh, do they do that? Because they do like worldwide tours. So someone like that, pretty cool.
I think someone, it would be pretty cool to speak to like someone who works on the production side of those big tours as well. Like how do they ship the stuff over? What makes the cut? What doesn't make the cut? Just maybe this is quite a boring thing that I think is really interesting, but the logistics of taking someone like the Rolling Stones around the world would be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. Yeah, the Rolling Stones would be great. They've been everywhere, right? Where haven't they been? That gig in China that they've done as well. Like, love to know what that was like.
Also, they would be pretty interesting because of they've been touring for so many years. They would probably be able to talk to the difference, in those countries.
Yeah.
How things have changed over the last however many years, or, what's stayed the same, what's new, what's different. That'd be quite interesting.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'd love to know all that sort of stuff. Bit niche and geeky for music, but I would be interested. I'd be into all that. I wouldn't care geeking out for an episode on that sort of stuff. I was going to say a footballer, but I think that's a bit lame. I think they just turn and play the match and go home. I don't think they actually get out there as such. Someone like Ed Sheeran, actually, he took a year off to go travelling.
Did he?
And yeah, I think in between albums or whatever he was doing, and he made a point just to go on the road and go backpacking. So I'd like to know how that was for him, especially being loaded. So did he stick to like the cheapo places, or did he live it up? Like, I'd love to know his technique for travelling.
Yeah. How old was he when he did it? Do you know?
How old is he now? He's about the same age as me, right? Us?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what, late 20s? I think he done that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So I'd like to talk to him about that. That'd be pretty cool.
Okay, so we've spoken about, your guests that have kind of, your most inspiring guests. Who's been your most extreme guest?
Yeah, the most extreme travel guy, and I'm due to do a 3rd episode with him, is Frank Paradis. So he is episode 75, and I saw a video on an extreme travel group on Facebook where he was in BBC Urdu in Pakistan, and there's a documentary for 10 minutes about him because he hitchhiked in Afghanistan when the Taliban took back control. And I was like, this is just insane. I need to know more. So I reached out to him on Facebook Messenger, and he said, yeah, I'll come on and talk about it. It took a couple of weeks to get set up because he was in Pakistan at that point, hitchhiking there too. So then it was an episode, and this was a tough one because I wasn't sure whether to do it or not. because we all know what's going on at the minute with the Taliban. It's got even worse since we've even done that episode with what they're doing. But I was like, is it responsible to go and talk to a guy who actually hitchhiked there? And when you listen to the episode, he had no problems. Like, the Taliban helped him out, made sure he had somewhere to stay, they checked his travel documents, he was totally safe. And that probably wasn't the right message, but I thought I'm going to have to do something like that, regardless of if it's right or wrong. And then if I get a bit of stick for it, it's fine, I'll take it. So that was the most extreme travel episode, because he talked about his time for, I think it's 12 weeks, he done 10, 12 weeks hitchhiking in Afghanistan when the Taliban were there. Crazy stories.
Wow. And do you think that's like the only time that you've really, with any of your guests, had that conflict about whether or not it's the right thing to do or the right thing to talk about and promote? Or have you had that in other episodes as well?
No, I think that's the only one. I've had a few stories, many from my friends' episodes. I was like, oh yeah, that can't go in, so I've taken them out. But in terms of an episode and guests that I've not met before, that was the only episode I can think where I was a bit conflicted, controversial, I think. I'll give you an example very quickly. Dave Seminara, who came onto the podcast, I think he is episode 80 odd. You can search for him, Dave Seminara. He wrote a book called Mad Travelers, which I read and I loved, and I reached out to him to interview, and he said, yeah. And that whole book was him spending 6-7 years with extreme travel communities. So people like Frank, who goes to these weird and unsafe places because they just feel they have to go there and tick it off, basically. And he is episode 82. Even he said, when he saw my title of that podcast episode, Traveling with Frank Paradis, Hitchhike in Afghanistan, he said, oh, that piqued my interest. I'm like, oh, but surely you have spent loads of time with extreme travelers before. And he said, yeah, I have, and that piqued my interest. So I'm like, oh wow, so that must have been a real unique out there episode. And Dave Seminara, who wrote a book about extreme travelers and who spent 6-7 years in that community, felt compelled to listen to that episode. So I guess that means something.
Who has been your most well-known guest?
Yeah, my answer to that is Juliana Dever. Do you know who she is?
No. And even if I did, you should tell us, because it's a podcast.
Yeah,
and we're talking about your guests.
She is in the TV series called Castle. I don't know if you've seen Castle.
No.
I haven't seen it either. So what happened was, we were talking and I had this innocent, it's just someone who, she reached out to me, so another one who reached out to say, hey, look, can I come on your podcast and talk about, she's got a travel blog that she's been awarded for, she's got a travel company now, and she does lots of traveling now. I said, yeah, come on, that sounds great. And so she came on to talk about traveling. And then I got on to innocently, so where did it all start? What were you doing previously to the blog? And then she said, oh yeah, I'm in a TV show called Castle. And I was like, she goes, do you know it? And I was like, nah, not really. But then when I started telling people that I know here and other people do you know the TV show Castle? They're like, yeah, James, it's got 8 seasons. It's huge in America. I was like, oh fuck, I've interviewed someone that's actually been on she's an actress, she's known, and her husband is one of the main guys in it. Real life husband is one of the main guys in it, and she was a co-star in that. So I think she is a well-known person just based on social media, what she gets up to. She's liked a lot, commented a lot on all her stuff, so I think she's pretty well known. I would have guessed I've had.
And so that's kind of a time when your research has
failed.
Yeah. I bet you researched everything to do with all the travel she's done, but you failed to realise she's famous.
Yeah, now I know. But she was super fine with it. Yeah.
Have you watched the show?
No.
You won't have time now, will you? You're off soon.
I have a rule that I don't watch TV shows that have got longer than 2 seasons. That's a rule. Don't do it.
Oh.
Is that controversial?
No, I don't think it is actually. I can see why you do that, because some just go on and on, and it's a bit silly.
Wrap it up.
But I keep thinking of ones where they've got 3 series and they're just perfect, and you're never going to see them because they don't.
Well, maybe you might stretch to 3, but that really is the limit.
Yeah, I'd get that.
I've broken it once actually. One TV show broke that rule. I think they done 5 seasons. One was a
Mm.
bit shit, so they could have done 4, but those 4 were brilliant, so it does break my rule. And that was The Wire. I did see that.
Season 2, isn't it? Season 2 is the slightly like one.
Yeah, I think so. Got through that.
But they needed season. It's annoying because yeah, it's not the best season, but they needed it
Yeah,
to kind of push it through to the good bit again.
yeah,
It's the
yeah,
shipping yard one, isn't it?
yeah. That's the one. Yeah,
Yeah.
bit shit.
But yeah, if you can, if anyone's trying to get through the wire, just power through season 2,
Yeah.
and you will be rewarded with hamster jam. And to some
Oh,
people that will mean everything, and
yeah.
to some people
Sorry.
that will mean nothing.
What the hell are they talking about? Oh, brilliant.
So with your guests, you
Mm,
said that you've had people on, quite a lot of your guests have a business perhaps that they run, like,
mm.
the vineyard or a type of travel company. Have you, you know, been inspired to, or perhaps you already have, reached out to those people and used any of those services or businesses that they
Yeah,
have?
so on my list, because obviously right now, I was working a normal job and I wasn't traveling, so it was a bit of a different vibe. But now I'm going traveling and I quit my job. I am starting to think, what can I do on the road that can prolong or at least help towards this like location independent lifestyle? And there's a few people who I've interviewed that would help me with that.
Mm.
Episode 97, Jet Set Julia, her name is. She's just released a few things and she's been traveling on the road for 4 years and kind of making money as she travels. She now does one-to-one sort of like coaching, and she's quite new, but I would like take her up on that service. I'm not really interested in the travel side. I can do that. It's more about the where do I go to like get work online? How do I pitch? How do I utilize maybe some skills I have or think I don't have? Like, what do I need to upskill to maybe like make some money on the road? So she is definitely someone who I would take up on. And also, a few of the travel writers have given me advice about the book that I've written that I've not released. I've written a book
You've written a book.
about my travels. Yeah, I've not done anything with it, and they've given me like pointers about what to do next. So I'd use that sort of experience and some services about maybe some contacts they have, publishers, etc., or editors, to kind of help me along with that. But it's a goal, but maybe not immediately. That's
Mm.
maybe next year. This year it's more about how can I sort of figure out online what I can do. So that's kind of like people like Emma Thompson, Peter Fines. Also, I've interviewed someone who's not released yet called Romana. She's wrote 9 books. She's now writing her 10th. She's got like a coaching thing about how to release a book, but
Mm.
starting from like idea to subject to writing it to editing it to pitching it to all the steps. They're a few of the people that I would get in contact with to help me out.
Okay. I'm going to open this question up to all of your guests. So, it can include friends.
Yeah.
Any absolute car crashes? Even if the entire episode isn't a car crash, any bits of it that you were like, oh God.
I've actually got a second episode with my friend, so Michael Butlin, who I travelled with for 6 months, and we done the first 3 months on an episode. Really early doors that one. That must be before Connor, I think. So like early doors, friend came on, helped me out. The first episode we done, brilliant. Again, some stories on there that I couldn't release because we're traveling and hedonistic travels and all that, traveling as mates. That went fine. So we said, oh, let's do a part 2, which would have covered New Zealand, Fiji, and Australia. Now, I was a bit ill. He clearly wasn't up for it. I could tell just by looking at him. I recorded it, and that section of people who just need a company like pushed along, just like real short answers, like okay, like stops earlier than you think. You got to think of a question really quickly. For some reason, he was like that in the interview. I haven't told him this. And I was like, do you know what? I'm not putting that out. Nah, it's not happening. It's not good enough. So
Wow,
yeah,
it was so bad it didn't even
nah.
it
There's
was
been 2
deemed
actually.
unsalvageable.
Yeah, there's been 2 episodes I've not released. Yeah, that's one of them. And in terms of a funny car crash, my episode with Tom Osborne, I think it's episode 7. He's a mate. We were laughing that much that I couldn't breathe. You know, that laughter when you lose control. And we had to stop the episode about 3 or 4 times because I just couldn't keep handle on it. Because there was a funny sort of, I don't want to butcher the joke. I think I might have shared it with you before, but
You have, and I've got it like, when you sort of got this joke in the back of your mind or the tip of your tongue, like I think I remember the joke.
so the joke was, well, it wasn't a joke, it was an unintentional joke. That's why I lost it. So he was talking about going to France, going to a place called Troyes, which is spelled Troyes. I, being a non-French speaker, thought it was called Troyes. But he said it's called Troyes. People might know it as Troyes, but it's called Troyes. Thought nothing of it. That's fine. A few minutes later, he's telling the story about, I think he was in Lyon or something, and they got into like, it's actually a bit of a boring story. They got into like sort of rush hour traffic, and they were delayed for some reason. But in that story, he's like, so we're sitting there, we're delayed, and we weren't going to make this tour. And I thought, phew. And straight away, I said, is that the sister city to Troyes? And that just, I don't know why I said it. Instantly just said that, and that just kicked us off, and I couldn't stop laughing at my own joke. He said, Troyes and foie. Yeah.
And that was it, you were
That
gone.
was it, I was gone. Yeah, had to stop recording, and I was just laughing for minutes. I was crying just because I came out with that line, and the way he reacted to it was just too funny. Yeah, he's very good at speaking as well. He's a bit of an actor. He's done a bit of acting in his time, so he can say words pretty funny, and he just made me laugh in that episode a few times. I think he said something like, we're trying to pronounce a French word, and we're like, he's like a bit of franglais for people. I'm like, franglais? What is that? But yeah, just certain words, and that joke about trois and foie, that was a car crash moment because I had to stop the episode, and in my early editing days, it's a bit stressful.
Okay. Do you have a favorite Friends episode? I feel like I can, ask you a little bit meaner questions when it comes to your friends.
Yeah, you can ask whatever you want. Yeah, I love all my friends a bit, including yourself.
And if
Coming
you
on.
don't say me, I will be mortally offended.
I think you had the most ridiculous stories about
Really?
just certain things you got up to in South America, like what is this about the horse, and about there's like Aaron speaking Spanish and you were speaking a different language, or whatever those stories were, just hilarious. But I tell you, someone who I thought also who was underrated in the way they spoke was my friend Lewis Huxtable. He's the one who lived in China. Just the way he speaks just made me laugh. Like some of the stories just telling us about when we're in South America and some of the things we got up to, just the way he told the story. And an example would be like, I said to him, you spent 5 years in China. What were some of the highlights of China that you saw? Like he said, I saw a lot. And he speaks Mandarin as well. He liked Mandarin. And he listed all the things. I was like, well, what about the Great Wall of China? He's like, oh yeah, I've seen that. He goes, mate, it's cool. It's a wall. I'm like, okay. And I just finished that sentence really early on. It's like, okay, it's cool. It's a wall. We'll move on. So that just the way he spoke was quite funny as well. Yeah, you two were my favourite episodes, I think. And you two are probably the ones that I recommend the most. The most ridiculous comment from my friends, actually, off the top of my head, is my mate Bambi, who was my first guest before you. He came back on with, I'll say it's his mate. I do know him. He's called Godders. And they were talking about their time in Southeast Asia. And he made some ridiculous comment about the purpose of travel is, has the place that they're going to, like a bar, has it got imported European lager, spag bowl, and showing Premier League football? That's a purpose of travel. So the most ridiculous comment, but made me laugh. That's one I've shared the most as well.
That kind of really goes quite against the whole ethos of your entire podcast as well.
Yeah. A couple of Friends episodes that are worth getting stuck in. Yeah, check out, people listening right now, check out Rachel's first guest episode. That was a very funny one with some of the stories with her and her partner Aaron in South and Central America. They were pretty funny. And I think episode 13 is Lewis Huxtable. That's worth a That's a long one, but it's worth a go. That's a pretty fun one.
You've got such a good memory for these things. But was the first episode that I did, was that where I was trying to talk to you about the Icelandic ponies?
Yeah.
And I was trying to make a very serious point.
Because I started asking, like, you said they can't leave. I'm like, well, what happens if they ain't got passports? Like, well,
yeah, I was trying to make a very serious point about biodiversity.
That's it. Yeah.
You hijacked it and made it into comedy.
It's the other story with you in South America saying hello, granddad, to a horse. Hola, abuelo, or whatever it was. Hola, abuelo.
Hola, abuelo.
Yeah, and Aaron's like, what the hell are you doing? And it's like locals like asking why are you speaking to a horse saying hello, granddad, or something like that. That was a hilarious story. I don't think I've got any more really to say about my friends, really. They've been helpful coming on, plug the gap, but also been some good content in there, some laughs. Weirdly, Robbo, who came on, who's quite a recent guest, I think late last year, his podcast stats are like in the top 6. I think there's like Friends episodes that have been downloaded the most is the first 2, so you and Bambi. I think he is 3rd,
Wow.
Robbo's a great guy. I'm going to be honest here. Didn't think anything special of it. Thought it was just a generic sort of backpacker vibe. Southeast Asia, heard it all before. Just like to get him on and tell a story. I didn't think there's anything unique with that, but somehow he's got a worldwide arm and it's kind of reached all around the globe. Yeah, he's up the stats there.
That either speaks to the popularity of Robbo, or the popularity of Southeast Asia, which
I've covered a lot. Yeah, I feel like I've exhausted Southeast Asia a lot. I tell you what, if someone said to me that, and I'm normally a yes guy when it comes to people talking about their travels, but let's say someone said, "Can I come on and talk about my 3 months in Southeast Asia that I've done in 2010?" I'd be like, "Mate, I've covered it." I'm sure your story is different in terms of you because you're a different person, but if I'm getting reached out to a little bit more now, I think I'm going to be a bit more selective about what can I offer to the audience that's a bit different. And that is a serious, I'm not joking around there. That, if someone wants to come on and talk about, I don't know, hitchhiking in Borneo, you're coming on, and there's no doubt about that. But sort of like the generic backpacker route in Southeast Asia, I've covered that a lot. I think it's time to try and branch out to different regions around the world if possible. But I think we've done well here. It's been fun.
Yeah, I've got no more questions. I think, how has it been to be the guest on your own podcast?
On my own podcast, it's been very, very good fun, actually. I've enjoyed it, I've got a little bit of experience being guesting other people's podcasts, but this has been obviously much, I won't say more fun, but like your friends, there's like a different vibe in it. So we can have a chat a bit more candidly and tell a few stories. So I've enjoyed it, Hopefully people will get something out of it for the 100th episode. Bit of a celebration.
Yeah. And, just to, suppose we should say thank you to all of your guests, friends and non-friends.
Yes.
Who've come on over the last 12 to 18 months. Is that about right? Yeah,
it was approaching 2 years. An absolute thanks to all my guests coming on. They've all contributed in their own way, and they've all become contacts and acquaintances and hopefully friends in the future. And they've all pretty much said, if you're in this place or on the road, let me know and we'll catch up. So that's been a nice part of the sort of podcasting community that I've learned in terms of guesting, and especially travel community. That kind of, I would expect that from a travel community because you meet people traveling, right? I'd be very surprised if someone said, don't contact me. Oh, okay.
Don't bother.
Yeah. I'm scarred. Don't bother doing that. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that'll be that. Yeah, thanks everyone coming on. It's been a great ride for 2 years and there's more to come.
Yeah. Very close now to the time that you're jetting off. So good luck with the final stint, the final, packing and getting everything ready. Yeah. We'll see you in New Zealand, or maybe we'll join you somewhere on the way.
How exciting. Yep, that sounds great. Thank you, Rachel, for guest hosting this podcast episode. Appreciate it. It's been super fun. I've enjoyed it. You've done well.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All good. Hey, just a quick one. I just want to say there are many ways to support this podcast. You can buy me a coffee and help support the podcast with $5. Or you can go to my merch store with the affiliate link with TeePublic, where there's plenty of merch available to buy, such as t-shirts, jumpers, hoodies, and also some children's clothing. Thirdly, which is free, you can also rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or Good Pods. Also, you can find me on social media on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. Simply just search for Winging It Travel Podcast, and you'll find me displaying all my social media content for travelling, podcast, and other stuff. Thank you. Thank you for listening to my Winging It Travel Podcast episode today. You can find me on Instagram at James Hammond Travel or Winging It Travel Podcast. You can search for both. I release weekly clips of this podcast episode, as well as photos from the last 8 to 10 years of my travels. You can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook and Pinterest by searching Winging It Travel Podcast. I do release daily content to do with travel and the podcast throughout the week. Also check out my website, jameshammond.org. There's content about myself, my travels, and there's also a newsletter sign up as well as a contact form. Finally, please rate and review the podcast on Podchaser. This is my platform of choice. Alternatively, you can rate this on Apple or wherever you get your podcasts from. This really helps the podcast gain a bit of traction for the future in terms of guests and content. And I'm glad to see that you guys are listening out there, reviewing it and enjoying the content so far. Stay safe, stay humble, keep listening, keep travelling, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers, James.